Welcome, the most captivating science fiction stories where mystery, action, and love intertwine are here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The employment office on level 7 of New Geneva Station smelled like recycled air and broken dreams, a combination that Zara had become intimately familiar with over the past 2 weeks. She clutched her data pad containing her credentials, engineering degree from the Velthari Institute, 3 years of systems maintenance experience, stellar performance reviews from her time as a refugee intake coordinator, and watched another human applicant get called ahead of her despite arriving an hour later. Next, the clerk announced, barely glancing up from his terminal. Zara approached the desk, her elongated ears instinctively flattening against her skull in a defensive posture that her species had evolved over millennia of social hierarchies. The luminescent patterns along her arms pulsed faintly with stress, a biological response that humans found either exotic or disturbing, depending on their particular flavor of prejudice. Zara Valthren, she said, placing her identification card on the counter. I have an appointment for the systems technician position with Meridian Freight. The clerk's expression shifted from boredom to thinly veiled distaste as he processed her information. Says here you're Velthari. Yes, Zara replied, though the question felt more like an accusation. Meridian just filled that position, he said without checking his system. But I can put you on the waiting list for, let's see, sanitation services or food preparation. Those positions don't require security clearance. Zara's empathic abilities, a gift that allowed her species to sense emotional undercurrents, detected the lie immediately. His satisfaction at rejecting her mixed with contempt and something darker, the kind of casual cruelty that people practiced when they believed their victims had no recourse. The job posting was active this morning, she said carefully, and my qualifications exceed the requirements. Look, lady, the clerk leaned back in his chair, I'm trying to help you here. Freight companies want humans handling their cargo. It's about trust, you understand, nothing personal. Everything about this was personal, but Zara had learned that pointing out discrimination only made humans more entrenched in their positions. She took her identification card and left without another word, adding Meridian Freight to her mental list of companies that would never consider her worthy of dignified employment. The corridor outside buzzed with the usual station activity, merchants hawking questionable electronics, families navigating between levels, and the ever-present security patrols that seemed to multiply whenever non-humans gathered in groups larger than two. Zara made her way toward the transport hub, calculating how many more rejections her savings could absorb before she faced the choice she'd been avoiding. Hey, beautiful, a voice called from behind her. You looking for work? Zara turned to see a human male in an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. He looked like the kind of man who measured success in terms of what he could take rather than what he could build. Depends on the work, she replied, though her empathic senses were already screaming warnings about his intentions. Smart girl. I run an entertainment establishment down on level 3. High-class place, very exclusive. You'd be perfect for our exotic services division. The euphemism hung in the air between them like toxic gas. Zara felt his emotional signature, lust mixed with contempt, the particular combination of desire and dehumanization that her species had learned to recognize as a precursor to exploitation. I'm a systems engineer, she said, backing away slowly. Sure you are, sweetheart, but engineering doesn't pay the bills, does it? My girls make more in a week than most tech workers see in a month. All you have to do is be yourself. Exotic, mysterious, willing to show humans what they're curious about. Zara's luminescent markings flared brighter with anger, a response that seemed to excite rather than deter him. She turned and walked away quickly, but his laughter followed her through the corridor like a threat. The transport to level 5 cost credits she couldn't afford, but Zara needed distance from the employment district and its particular brand of hopelessness. She found herself in the residential section, where small businesses lined the corridors between apartment blocks. Most were closed or closing, their owners heading home to families and lives that didn't depend on the arbitrary kindness of hiring managers. One shop remained lit, a small repair facility with hand-painted signs advertising electronics maintenance and custom fabrication. Through the window, she could see a human man bent over a circuit board, his movements careful and precise. The shop looked barely profitable, the kind of one-person operation that scraped by on skill and determination rather than capital investment. Zara paused outside, her empathic abilities detecting something unusual about the man's emotional state. Where she expected to find the usual human mixture of ambition and frustration, she sensed contentment, focus, and something else. A kind of quiet satisfaction that came from work done well rather than work done for maximum profit. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she'd skipped lunch to save credits. The practical voice in her head calculated her remaining resources. Enough for rent this month, maybe food if she was careful, but nothing beyond basic survival. The entertainment district beckoned with its promise of quick credits and its guarantee of soul-crushing degradation. She pushed open the shop door, a small bell announcing her arrival. The human looked up from his work, and Zara braced herself for the familiar sequence. Initial curiosity about her alien features, followed by either disgust or inappropriate interest. Instead, Marcus Webb simply said, "We're technically closed, but if it's an emergency repair, I can take a look." His emotional signature remained steady, professional. No spike of xenophobic revulsion, no predatory calculation about her vulnerability. Just the mild concern of a craftsman interrupted in his work but willing to help a potential customer. "I'm not here about repairs," Zara said, her voice carrying more exhaustion than she'd intended. "I'm looking for work." Marcus set down his tools and really looked at her for the first time, his gaze taking in her professional attire, the data pad clutched in her hands, and the particular kind of defeat that came from too many closed doors. "What kind of work?" he asked, and Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks, genuine curiosity without hidden agenda. She almost told him about her engineering background, her systems expertise, her desperate need for legitimate employment. Instead, worn down by rejection and the predatory offers that seemed to be her only alternative, she said the words that had been building in her throat like poison. "Whatever you need. I'm flexible about requirements." The implication hung in the air, and Zara watched Marcus's emotional signature shift. But instead of the excitement or disgust she expected, she sensed something that made no sense: concern, followed by what felt distinctly like sadness. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked. Zara stared at Marcus, her empathic abilities struggling to process his question. In her experience, humans who showed interest in her well-being usually wanted something in return, something that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the exotic curiosity her species represented to their kind. "I'm not hungry," she lied, though her stomach chose that moment to produce a sound that contradicted her entirely. Marcus smiled, and Zara felt the genuine warmth in his emotional signature, not the calculated charm of someone working an angle, but simple human kindness that seemed as foreign to her recent experience as faster-than-light travel. "Right," he said. "Well, I was just about to make some coffee. Real stuff, not that synthetic sludge they serve in the food courts. You're welcome to join me while we talk about this work situation." He moved toward a small kitchen area tucked behind the main workshop, and Zara found herself following despite every survival instinct that screamed about trusting humans who offered things without immediate payment. The kitchen consisted of a heating unit, a small refrigeration chamber, and shelves lined with what appeared to be actual food rather than processed nutrition supplements. "So," Marcus said, busying himself with an old-fashioned coffee brewing apparatus, "what's your background? You mentioned work, but you seem pretty well educated for someone looking for flexible arrangements. The careful way he avoided repeating her euphemism suggested he understood exactly what she'd been implying. Zara settled onto a stool that creaked under her weight, not because she was heavy, but because everything in the shop seemed to be held together by determination and improvised repairs. "I'm a systems engineer," she admitted, "specialized in diagnostic protocols and adaptive maintenance systems. Graduated summa cum laude from the Velthari Institute before." She gestured vaguely at the walls around them. "Before we became refugees." Marcus paused in his coffee preparation, and Zara sensed his emotional response to her revelation, not surprise at her qualifications, but anger at the circumstances that had forced her to consider other options. "Let me guess," he said. 15 interviews, 15 rejections, always for reasons that have nothing to do with your actual abilities." 16, actually. "I stopped counting after the personnel manager at Stellar Dynamics suggested I might be better suited for their hospitality division." Zara accepted the cup Marcus offered, inhaling the rich aroma of genuine coffee beans. "How did you know?" "My sister Anna used to volunteer with the Refugee Assistance Program," Marcus said, settling across from her with his own cup. "Before she died, she spent a lot of time documenting employment discrimination cases. According to her research, qualified alien applicants have about a 3% success rate in legitimate job placement." Zara took a sip of coffee and felt something inside her chest unclench for the first time in weeks. "And the other 97%. Some leave the station, try their luck elsewhere. Some take whatever work they can get in the gray markets. And some—" He trailed off, but Zara's empathic abilities caught the edge of his emotional state, protective anger mixed with grief. "Some end up in entertainment establishments," she finished quietly. Anna called it economic coercion. "Make legitimate work impossible to obtain, then act like people choose degrading alternatives freely." Marcus stared into his coffee cup. She was working on legislation to change the employment screening process when her transport had an accident. "Accident?" Zara repeated, sensing the complexity behind that simple word. "Transport operator hired the cheapest pilot available, unlicensed human who got the job because the qualified Zilithian applicant was deemed too risky for passenger service." Marcus's emotional signature flared with old pain. "Anna always said that discrimination kills in more ways than people realize." They sat in comfortable silence while Zara processed this information. Her empathic abilities painted a clear picture of Marcus's motivations. Grief transformed in 3 weeks into her employment at Marcus's repair shop. Zara had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. If normal could include diagnosing the emotional states of malfunctioning industrial equipment and explaining to confused customers why their cargo handlers were having what amounted to electronic anxiety attacks. "The loading mechanism isn't broken," she told Captain Rodriguez, whose freight hauler had been experiencing intermittent failures. "It's suffering from performance stress because the previous owner never updated its operational parameters after installing heavier cargo pods." Rodriguez, a weathered woman who'd spent 30 years hauling goods between stations, looked skeptical. "You're telling me my ship has feelings?" "Not feelings exactly," Zara replied, making final adjustments to the cargo system's neural network. "But complex systems develop operational patterns that mirror emotional responses. Your ship has been trying to lift loads beyond its comfort zone for months, so it developed what humans might call performance anxiety. And fixing that involves therapeutic counseling for my cargo bay." Marcus emerged from under the ship's main console, wiping grease from his hands. "Think of it as updating the system's self-confidence parameters. Zara's modifications tell the machinery that it's perfectly capable of handling the increased load, which eliminates the performance hesitation." Rodriguez activated her loading mechanism, which now operated smoothly instead of hesitating between lift cycles. "I'll be damned. How much do I owe you for robot therapy? After she left with her properly functioning freight hauler, Marcus turned to Zara with the expression he wore when processing something that challenged his assumptions about the universe. Do you realize, he said, that you just revolutionized industrial psychology without meaning to? Zara cleaned her tools with the methodical precision she brought to everything. I just applied standard Velthari maintenance protocols. Most species with empathic abilities use similar approaches. Most humans barely acknowledge that artificial intelligences can develop personality quirks, let alone emotional disorders. Marcus pulled up his account ledger, which showed a steady increase in both customers and revenue since Zara's arrival. We've fixed more complex problems in 3 weeks than I managed in the previous 6 months. The success felt fragile to Zara, like something that could disappear the moment anyone in authority decided her presence was inconvenient. She'd learned to appreciate Marcus's straightforward approach to employment: fair wages, clear expectations, and no hidden requirements that had nothing to do with technical expertise. Captain Rodriguez seemed pleased, Zara said carefully. But what happens when word spreads that you're employing alien diagnostic methods? Some humans get uncomfortable when non-human approaches prove more effective than their traditional techniques. Marcus's emotional signature shifted to something Zara had learned to recognize as protective determination. Let them be uncomfortable. Anna used to say that progress happens when people realize their prejudices are costing them money. The shop's door chimed, interrupting their conversation. Zara looked up expecting another customer, but instead saw a well-dressed human in an expensive suit flanked by 2 security officers. Her empathic senses immediately detected danger, not physical threat, but the kind of bureaucratic menace that could destroy lives with official paperwork. Marcus Webb. The man inquired, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I'm Administrator Chen from Station Employment Services. We need to discuss your recent hiring practices. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Chen and Zara. What about them? Our records show you've employed an alien worker without proper documentation review. Chen produced a data pad thick with official seals. Station regulations require all non-human employees to undergo additional screening procedures. Zara felt her heart sink as she recognized the familiar pattern: bureaucratic harassment designed to make employing aliens so complicated that most businesses simply avoided the hassle. She reached for her identification cards, but Marcus held up a hand to stop her. Zara's documentation was processed through standard channels, he said calmly. Her work authorization is completely legal. Legal perhaps, but not optimal from a station security perspective. Chen's emotional signature carried the oily satisfaction of someone who enjoyed exercising petty power. We've received complaints about unfair competition from other repair shops. Apparently, your alien employee has advantages that create an uneven playing field. You mean she's better at her job than human technicians? Marcus asked. I mean she uses alien techniques that our local workers can't replicate. It's economically disruptive. Chen gestured at the successfully repaired equipment around the shop. We need to maintain fair employment practices for all species. Zara almost laughed at the irony. Fair employment practices that prevented qualified aliens from working legally, while pushing them toward exploitation in underground markets. She could sense Chen's real motivations, not concern about fairness but protection of the system that kept alien workers vulnerable and desperate. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus asked. Simple solution, Chen replied. Terminate the alien employee, and we'll expedite work permits for qualified human technicians. We can even recommend some candidates who specialize in traditional diagnostic methods. Traditional methods that don't work as well, Marcus pointed out. Traditional methods that don't require special accommodations. Chen's gaze fixed on Zara with the kind of assessment usually reserved for potentially dangerous equipment. Alien empathic abilities raise security concerns. How do we know she's not accessing sensitive information from customer equipment? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Zara's empathic abilities were precisely tuned to mechanical systems and emotional states. She couldn't extract data from computer networks any more than a human could taste music. But explaining that would require Chen to care about accuracy rather than convenient excuses for discrimination. That's not how empathic abilities work, she said quietly. According to alien claims, Chen replied. But station security requires verification from human experts, which could take months of testing and documentation. In the meantime, this employment arrangement creates liability issues that could affect your business license. The threat was clear. Comply or face regulatory harassment that could destroy Marcus's livelihood. Zara felt the familiar weight of inevitability settling over her, another door closing, another opportunity sacrificed to fear and prejudice. "I should go," she said to Marcus. "You've been kind, but I won't let my presence hurt your business." Marcus's emotional signature flared with anger and determination. "Nobody's going anywhere. Chen, I assume you have documentation supporting these security concerns." "Station policy doesn't require. Because if you're going to accuse my employee of potential espionage, I'd like to see the evidence. And I'd like to know which repair shops filed complaints about unfair competition." Marcus crossed his arms. "Since this seems to be about transparency and fair practices." Chen's confidence wavered slightly, his bureaucratic bluster meeting unexpected resistance. Zara sensed his discomfort as Marcus refused to play by the usual rules of intimidation and compliance that kept the discriminatory system functioning smoothly. Administrator Chen's discomfort grew more pronounced as Marcus pressed for documentation he clearly didn't possess. Zara watched the confrontation unfold, her empathic abilities painting a complex picture of motivations and fears swirling through the small repair shop. "The complaints are confidential," Chen said, his bureaucratic confidence beginning to crack under scrutiny. "But I assure you they're legitimate concerns about market fairness." "Confidential complaints about public employment practices," Marcus replied. "How convenient. Zara, would you mind running a diagnostic on Chen's data pad? I'm curious about its emotional state." Zara blinked in surprise. "Marcus, that's not really." "Actually, it is," Marcus interrupted, his expression carrying a hint of the same protective anger she'd sensed when he talked about his sister's work. "You can sense stress patterns in complex systems, right? Well, bureaucratic corruption creates distinctive stress patterns in the people perpetrating it." Chen stepped backward, clutching his data pad protectively. "That's highly irregular. Station security protocols prevent unauthorized scanning of official equipment." "I'm not scanning anything," Zara said slowly, beginning to understand Marcus's strategy. "But I can sense emotional states from here, and yours is." "Interesting." She extended her empathic awareness toward Chen, feeling the complex mixture of guilt, fear, and anger that surrounded him like a toxic cloud. His emotional signature told a story of systematic corruption, bribes taken, favors granted, and a growing fear that his activities might finally face scrutiny. "You're terrified," she said quietly. "Not of me or of alien workers, but of someone discovering that you've been taking payments to restrict alien employment while directing desperate workers toward specific establishments." Chen's face went pale. "That's a serious accusation." "It's an emotional observation," Zara corrected. "I can sense guilt, fear of discovery, and what feels like remorse. You know what you're doing is wrong, but you're trapped in a system that rewards cruelty and punishes conscience." The security officers flanking Chen shifted uncomfortably, their own emotional signatures revealing confusion about their role in what was beginning to look less like law enforcement and more like extortion. "Officer Martinez," Marcus addressed the younger security guard directly. How many times has Administrator Chen required you to escort him on employment harassment visits? And how many of those visits ended with business owners agreeing to pay additional fees for permit expediting? Martinez glanced nervously at his partner, then at Chen, whose emotional state was now broadcasting panic loud enough for Zara to sense from across the room. We just provide security for official inspections," Martinez said uncertainly. "Official inspections that always seem to find problems requiring immediate payment to resolve," Marcus continued. "Anna documented 17 cases of businesses being pressured to fire alien employees and pay expediting fees for human worker permits." Chen's data pad chimed with an incoming message, and Zara felt his emotional state shift from panic to something approaching terror. Whatever the message contained, it had transformed his tactical retreat into full-scale flight response. "This conversation is over," Chen announced, backing toward the door. "Webb, you have 24 hours to comply with employment regulations or face license suspension." "Administrator Chen," a new voice called from the shop's entrance. Captain Rodriguez stepped inside, followed by 3 other human customers who'd benefited from Zara's diagnostic abilities. "I just filed a complaint with station security about employment discrimination. Seems like an interesting time for you to be threatening the best repair facility on the station." Chen's emotional signature collapsed into defeated resignation as he realized his intimidation tactics had backfired spectacularly. The corrupt system he'd helped maintain worked only when victims remained isolated and afraid. It couldn't survive public scrutiny